of the Korean Peninsula. North Korea remains an extraordinary threat and requires continued vigilance.
That's Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan speaking in Singapore after reports of a purge by Kim Jong-un of parts of his inner circle.
Well, here to talk more about North Korea is retired four-star general and Fox News senior strategic analyst, General Jack Keane. General, let's start by talking about what's going down in North Korea. And let's just be clear here. The U.S. government nor Fox News has independently confirmed these reports. It's all coming from one South Korean newspaper, but the paper's been right before. So we're going to talk about it. And just to kind of put it in perspective, this would be like a U.S. president imprisoning a Secretary of State and executing his top deputy. Obviously, that would never happen in this country, but that just kind of shows you how high up this goes in North Korea, how high up the ladder. What does this say to you about the future of nuclear negotiations with North Korea?
Well, certainly it underscores and provides testimony to this repressive regime and its outrageous behavior. And they got tens of thousands of people in their own jailhouses. He kills members of his family. He's killed other people that are opposed to him. He doesn't just kill them. He used an artillery weapon on a number of high-ranking officials. Really extraordinary. What happened here is Kim Jong-un expected at the Hanoi summit to get sanction relief because they put on the table their research nuclear facility to close down, as they had done with previous administrations, and always received sanction relief. They went home without it. Initially, he fired his chief negotiator envoy who had been in the White House, and now it's reported that he indeed has killed him. And the reason he's done that is because it was a failure from their perspective. He came home to the strong elites around him, and he had nothing to show for it. And that is why we have seen this systematic and quite deliberate escalation of weapons firing, from anti-tank weapons to smaller rockets to larger rockets, small missiles, now to a ballistic missile. That is all in an attempt to gain some leverage and get back to a Kim Jong-un-Trump summit. The United States position is we're not going back to a summit unless you put on a table at lower levels some actual definition of denuclearization. You're going to have to give us something, which they have not really done in terms of denuclearization.
Heading into the Hanoi summit, there had been so much hope that perhaps now finally Kim Jong-un might be willing to change his ways. Does something like this purge at the top, essentially wiping out his entire envoy to the United States, does that mean that he's really not willing to even consider going down a different path? I mean, does that wipe out some of that hope heading into the summit? Well,
I think it tells you how important the summit is to him, how important the negotiations with the United States, and particularly with President Trump. I'm of a mind, and the reason why he's been critical of Ambassador Bolton, the National Security Advisor, Secretary Pompeo, our Secretary of State, is because he wants to be able to negotiate with President Trump, who he believes he'll be able to get a better deal from. So he truly wants a deal because of the actual impact of the sanctions. They're taking its toll on him. Now, whether he's going to give up all his nuclear weapons and all of his ballistic missiles, I think we have to have a healthy dose of skepticism about all of that.
General Keane, there are a million other things I want to ask you about: China, Iran, the 75th anniversary of D-Day, but unfortunately I'm going to have to leave it there because it's a busy news day. We got a lot going on. Thank you so much.
Good talking to you.
Good talking to you. Leland?
And we'll get to the 75th anniversary of D-Day coming this week. How do we keep the memories of those who saved the world alive? And as we approach the 75th anniversary of D-Day, live look at the World War II Memorial here in Washington. Fewer and fewer of those who stormed the beaches are alive to tell us about it. The USAA is working on that, keeping that memory alive with the USAA Poppy Wall of Honor. Here's USAA Senior Vice President of Military Affairs, retired Navy Vice Admiral John Byrd.
June 6th will be the 75th anniversary of the invasion of Normandy. So in honor of that, on our panel, the educational side, the World War II panel, we have a video that highlights two veterans telling their own stories about parachuting in behind the lines in support of the Normandy invasion.
The video is playing here, 75th anniversary of D-Day, USAA. Give us a sense of why this is so important.
Well, as you mentioned, they're dying. We're losing these veterans, and hearing their firsthand accounts is just wonderful, emotional, and inspirational. So these two men that truly are heroes speak of their fallen comrades.
I can tell you 40 times at least that I shouldn't be here. Easy. There was a Hitler Youth Division sitting on that hill waiting for us, and they opened up on us with everything. And that's where I lost 7 men that day.
I was looking around for my buddy that I knew always had my back. I said, well, where's Smitty? And the lieutenant looked at me and he said, Smitty's gone.
I'll tell you what struck me most is when one of the individuals was asked and said, you're a hero, and he said, no, I'm not a hero. The heroes didn't come home.
I did the job that they asked me to do, but I'm a survivor.
No. The heroes never returned.
You think about being able to tell the oral history, which is how we live. There were 116,000 who died in World War I, and there aren't any veterans left to tell that story.
No, and very few out of World War II, as you know, because they are getting very senior.
Now, they did not call them the greatest generation for nothing, and the humility of those moments
That's what I was just
we've totally lost that.
Saying I'm a survivor, not a hero.
Right. Yeah, and not only that, just sort of I did my job, and then they came home and built the America that we now all enjoy so much.
75th anniversary coming up, and of course President Trump going to be going over there.
Martha McCallum there as well
week.
For some incredible programming there too.
Yep.
All right.
Coming up.
We'll meet a couple of World War II vets next
That's
hour
right.
to
Coming
talk
up.
about that.
Also coming up, we have new details emerging in the Virginia Beach shooting that left 12 people dead, plus the gunman. And police are now identifying the shooter and saying they have recovered additional weapons at his home. Mark Meredith is on the scene with more. Hi, Mark.
Kristen, the FBI has been out here all morning working with local police trying to figure out exactly what happened at yesterday's shooting. We'll have the very latest on the investigation coming up at the top of the hour. Stay with us.
The Virginia Beach community in mourning today as officials investigate the tragic workplace shooting that left 12 dead, 4 others injured. Welcome to America's News Headquarters from Washington. I'm Kristen Fisher.
And now we learn not only about the victims, but also about those who ran towards the sound of gunfire to save more from being killed. I'm Leland Vittert. Police did kill the shooter, but still don't understand why he opened fire. Mark Meredith on the scene arrived there last night as the investigation continues. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Leland, investigators have been out here, as you mentioned, all night and continue throughout the day. We've seen them right here behind the police tape as well as the patrol cars, piecing together exactly what happened in that public building yesterday afternoon. We have seen the FBI out here as well, combing through the parking lot, looking for any evidence that may have been left behind. But the big question at this hour, again, is what may have led up to the shooting? What was the possible motive? Police have decided not to speculate about what was happening in the moments leading up to the shooting. However, we do know that the gunman was a 15-year employee of the city. He worked as an engineer. He was still, as we're told, in good standing with the city. He had not been terminated. He was still employed with the city. And investigators say they have been looking into everything involving the suspect's background, including what was happening at home and any sort of weapons that were found. They know that one handgun was found on Friday with an expanded magazine, but they also say that they're still trying to piece together what other weapons may have been out there.
ATF is also assisting us. We did recover additional weapons at the scene. I'm not at liberty to tell what those weapons are at this time. We also recovered additional weapons at the suspect's home.
This morning, President Trump tweeted about the massacre, offering Virginia Beach the full support of the federal government. We know that he has also spoken with the governor of Virginia as well as local officials here on the ground. But one thing that we've heard time and time again is that public officials, as well as the city, do not want the attention focused on the gunman. They want this focused on those 12 people who lost their lives. We are expecting to get some additional information within the next hour or so, 2 hours or so, at a news conference in the 3 o'clock hour. We'll be monitoring throughout the day. Leland, back to you, sir.
All right, Mark, thanks a lot. And to that point of spending a minute to not only remember but think about the 12 lives that were lost, yesterday at a press conference, authorities read the name of each one who was killed last night. They were killed this morning. They read the names. Take a listen.
Lakita C. Brown, who works in public works for over 4.5 years and is a right-of-way agent. And she is a resident of Chesapeake, Virginia. Tara Welch Gallagher, who works in public works for over 6 years and serves as an engineer and is a resident of Virginia Beach. Mary Louise Gale, who has worked in public works for over 24 years and serves as a right-of-way agent and is a resident of Virginia Beach. Alexander Mikhail Gusev, who has worked for over 9 years in public works and is a right-of-way agent and is a resident of Virginia Beach. Catherine A. Nixon, who serves in public utilities for over 10 years as an engineer and is a resident of Virginia Beach. Richard H. Nettleton. Rich worked in public utilities for over 28 years, served as an engineer, served with me as a lieutenant in Germany in the 130th Engineer Brigade, and was a resident of Norfolk. Christopher Kelly Rapp, who served in public works for just 11 months as an engineer and is a citizen of Powhatan. Ryan Keith Cox, who served in public utilities for over 12.5 years and is an account clerk and a resident of Virginia Beach. Joshua A. Hardy, who served in public utilities for 4.5 years as an engineering technician and is a resident of Virginia Beach. Michelle Missy Langer, who served in public utilities for 12 years as an administrative assistant and is a resident of Virginia Beach. Robert Bobby Williams, who served in public utilities for over 41 years as a special projects coordinator and is a resident of Chesapeake. Herbert Burt Snelling, who was a contractor trying to fill a permit and is a resident of Virginia Beach.
I'm so glad we did that.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we did that and went and showed the face and name of every single person that has been impacted by this shooting, because when you hear about another mass shooting in the United States, it has just become so routine that I think so many Americans' initial reaction is, oh my gosh, another shooting, and it's become almost easy to forget the people and the families who are impacted by this.
Yeah, we're both old enough to remember when we waited not only to see the pictures of those who had been killed, but to talk about them and to bury them before the political conversation happened. Now, an event happens, the political conversation happens, and we move on without talking about them. So we're glad we did that, and we hope you take a moment to think about those who were lost and think about their families now whose lives have been changed forever.
Forever. So we're going to move on back to some politics now, because we have some high-level talks between U.S. and Mexican officials that are set to take place in Washington next week as tensions between the countries escalate in the wake of President Trump's newly proposed tariffs on Mexican goods. Our Garrett Tenney live from the North Lawn of the White House with the latest. Hey, Garrett.
Hey, Kristen. Yeah, Mexico is in a bit of a tough spot here because the White House hasn't laid out any specific goals or figures that Mexico needs to reach in order to avoid these tariffs, with the only benchmark being once President Trump is satisfied that Mexico is doing everything they can to stop the flow of migrants to our southern border. The administration has laid out 3 areas, 3 steps that Mexico can take to do that, though, saying that Mexico can secure its southern border with Guatemala, crack down on smugglers who are moving migrants through the country, and change its asylum laws so that a person has to apply in the first country they arrive in, which would be Mexico. Here's Press Secretary Sarah Sanders on Friday.
We're asking Mexico to enforce their own laws to help stop the people coming in from Central America. We've seen a massive influx of people coming from that region, and they have certainly the ability and the legal authority in which to deal with it, and we're simply asking them to do that.
Now, the president's getting some serious blowback for trying to address the crisis at the border through tariffs, though. Even members of his own party, such as Iowa Senators Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst, are criticizing the decision. Grassley said in a statement, "I support nearly every one of President Trump's immigration policies, but this is not one of them. I urge the president to consider other options." And Ernst piled on, saying that the tariffs could threaten ratification of the new trade deal to replace NAFTA, saying, "If the president goes through with this, I'm afraid progress to get this trade agreement across the finish line will be stifled. While I support the need for comprehensive border security and a permanent fix to illegal immigration, this is not the right path forward." Business groups are also very concerned about how the tariffs and a potential trade war with Mexico would hurt both the U.S. economy and American consumers.
You should.
You should.
Now, and then to top it off, it does nothing to solve the very real problem at the southern border. The problems that we have of migrants crossing the border has nothing to do with our trading relationship with Mexico.
So far, Mexico's president has not responded with any retaliatory tariffs, saying that he prefers to try and address this through diplomatic channels and negotiations. And those talks will start this week on Wednesday, when Mexico's foreign minister will meet with both Secretary of State Mike Pompeo as well as senior advisor to the president Jared Kushner to discuss the tariffs and possible steps Mexico can take to avoid escalating these trade negotiations and trade disputes over the immigration crisis at our southern border. Now, a lot of questions, though, about how much real progress those talks will be able to make, because the president will be out of the country. He will not be taking part in these initial talks. And of course, he is the one who wanted to enact these measures to use tariffs to try to curb the immigration crisis at our southern border. Not many of his advisors support that idea, behind the scenes, at least leading up to this. Kristen and Leland.
Yeah, definitely. Garrett Tenney, live from the North Lawn of the White House, wearing glasses. I've never seen you in glasses, and I dig them. They look good on you.
Thank you.
Garrett, thank you.
Yeah, we'll get into the issue of some of those advisors who supported it, who didn't, in a little while. Meantime, one place that they are watching this very, very closely is in Michigan because of the auto industry there and the tariffs effects there. Dan Kildee, congressman for Michigan, and I think we have this title right, Chief Deputy Whip of the Democratic Caucus in the House of Representatives. Good. All right. We want to double check that. It's good to see you as always, sir. We appreciate it. Real quick.
Thanks, Leland.
How worried are your constituents over these tariffs?
Well, they're pretty concerned because, we have an integrated economy, and that's one of the things that the new trade agreement between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico is trying to rationalize. But we can't ignore the fact that tariffs on Mexico are going to have an impact on Americans. Those tariffs will really be paid by American companies and American consumers, and it will disrupt the supply chain. So
there had been this very
tenuous
deal, perhaps, to get the new deal that was the redo of NAFTA, essentially, that you were talking about between Canada, Mexico, and the United States through. It appeared as though there was a path for it. With this new set of tariffs coming potentially, is that path now gone?
Well, I don't know that it's gone. I think this is an agreement that we have to get right and get it passed in a way that makes it clear that Mexico is going to enforce its own law, which ironically is the concern that the president raises regarding immigration policy. So I share the concern that Mexico does not always consistently enforce its own law. We're trying to get that right in this trade agreement. But I agree with Senator Grassley on this particular point. These tariffs are very unhelpful, both in terms of the American economy, but it really creates a lot of uncertainty around consideration of USMCA.
Yeah, well, the split in the Republican Party on this is noteworthy, as you pointed out, Chuck Grassley coming out against them. Move on to something that the Republicans are united about, save one Republican, which is the issue of impeachment. We'll toss up the latest Fox News polling. Should President Trump be impeached? Democrats, yes, 72%, no, 20%. Republicans, no surprise, 87% no. But independents, 33% yes, 45% no. Michigan is a swing state. How worried are you that if you all get pushed in, and by you all I mean Democratic leadership, into a impeachment debate and discussion, that this is going to crush you guys with independents?
Well, I have one of those positions on this subject that we've talked about in the past that probably doesn't make people on either extreme very happy. I don't think we should make a decision about impeachment until we are completely sure that we've gotten all the facts we need to come to that judgment. I think we need to continue to pursue those facts. We have a lot of information from the Mueller report. So I'm not at that place where I think we should go there, but I don't think we can take it off the table.
As you and I have
really,
talked about a
Leland,
lot, reasonableness is hard to find and is not too popular in Washington. How hard is the whip and the chief deputy whip at that, is it to keep the more liberal among your caucus in line to the thoughts you just laid out?
Well, I think this is one of those areas, and I'm only speaking for myself, not for the whip operation or leadership, but even in my role as chief deputy whip, I think this is one of those questions that members have to come to their own conclusions on. And I actually don't believe that we should be even considering the electoral politics of this. I apply what I call the Caitlin and Colin rule. Those are my two grandchildren. I want to be able to defend the decision I make today, 15 years from now, when they ask, well, what did you do, Papa, during this period? I mean, this is really not something that we should do with political calculations being the driving consideration.
Well, there are some in your caucus who have, as you know, noted the political calculations of it. The rule you just laid out perhaps would be one that we were all wise to live by as we go forth here over the next couple of years. Dan Kildee with us from Michigan. Congressman, good to see you. Safe travels back here to D.C., to the, well, the swamp that feels quite swampy right now with the weather here.
Exactly.
All right.
Thanks, Leland.
Thank you, sir. Kristen?
Floodwaters threatening parts of Arkansas, and the worst may still be to come. Casey Stiegel is in Conway, Arkansas, with the latest. And Casey, as you were saying in your last report, it's just everywhere. It's hard to know where you should go because there's just water everywhere.
That's right, Kristen, and you and Leland were also telling me that you guys both used to work in the local Little Rock, Arkansas market back in the day, and so you know the state well. It's so pretty, and the people here are so nice, and it's just devastating when you drive for miles and miles and miles, and you see multiple communities impacted. There are states of disaster declared in 16 counties across the state of Arkansas, and the problem is getting worse further south, because what's happening is all of the rainwater that fell in Oklahoma and in Arkansas over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, well, it's all coming downstream. So you can see how swift the water is moving back here. The Arkansas River well out of its banks. Typically, it is over on the other side of those buildings, but those buildings are now either totally submerged or partially submerged. The green roof that you're looking at right there, where you can see those white caps, that is a picnic area where on a Saturday someone would be sitting with their family enjoying a picnic, but you see it's now underwater just about. The raging Arkansas River has spilled out of its banks in so many places, inundating the local bayous and the levee systems and all of the things that are designed to protect communities from flooding. But unfortunately, we have had some levee breaches, and there is concern that others could breach down in the Little Rock area, north and south of there, where some of them are already leaking. We just got back from a ride-along with the sheriff's office, and they took us to some of the hardest impacted areas where we saw homes taking on water, sandbags on roofs. Most of the evacuations are voluntary, and a lot of the residents, frankly, choosing to stick it out in order to keep tabs on their property. But despite the loss and historic nature of this flooding, as we see in all disasters we cover, the community is pulling together and helping their neighbors.
All that we ask for people to do is just pray for Arkansas, pray for Yale County, pray for these people that are fixing to lose their homes in water, you know, and the lands.
The governor of this state estimates that about 500 homes so far have been impacted by the flooding, a number that could go up, sadly, as the waters continue going up. Kristen?
Casey,
Leland?
I just can't get over how fast the water is moving behind you. That's just nuts.
Yeah.
You can just see how dangerous that would be
White
if somebody
caps
gets
over buildings.
Yeah, well, white caps over buildings. Wow, Casey Stiegel, thank you for bringing us that story.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
That sums it up, sadly, all too well. Casey is about 30 miles north of Little Rock, where they are already evacuating folks in North Little Rock, and there is an increased risk of severe weather and flooding across much of the country still today. With that, we bring in Adam Klaas from the Fox Severe Weather Center, tracking it all. Hi, Adam.
Hey there, Leland. Yeah, unfortunately, we're set up for another day where we could see some rounds of some big weather. This is from the National Weather Service, really highlighting an area from the Great Lakes stretching all the way back across the plains. All of this, obviously, in the Mississippi River Delta, which means all that water is going to be flowing to the Mississippi, anything we see today. Here's your future radar. These aren't really huge storms, but they could get up to severe level, with severe thunderstorms being the most likely, winds up to 60 miles an hour, heavy rain in any of these cells, maybe even some hail. But this is the line we're really going to be paying attention to. Not as widespread of rain as we've seen the last week, but unfortunately in the week ahead there is going to be some really widespread rain. This is a forecasted precipitation model taking you all the way into next weekend, so this is 7 days out, but look where all the rain is falling. You're getting widespread 3 to 4 inches across the middle of the country. All of this having to run into the Arkansas River, the Ohio River, eventually the Mississippi River. And that's why we're still under all these areas with flood watches and warnings across all these major rivers. There's your Arkansas River heading down in, feeding into the Mississippi, flooding in pretty much all of these tributaries. Unfortunately, Leland, the next week ahead, it looks like more rain for the middle of the country. So they're going to be dealing with this for a little while.
Yeah, more rain, rising waters as well. Adam, thanks.
So let's bring in Arkansas Republican Congressman Steve Womack, who has been on the ground helping with these recovery efforts, and he joins us now by phone. Congressman, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to talk to us.
Kristen, it's great to be with you. And let me just say, before we talk flooding, as a former mayor, how my heart breaks for the people in Virginia Beach, and our thoughts and prayers are with them as well.
Hearts are breaking for folks in Virginia Beach and all across your state of Arkansas. You have been on the ground touring the damage. What are you seeing? How can people help?
Well, first of all, it's an epic flood. And Kristen, you made a comment just a minute ago when Casey was in front of the Toadsuck Dam there in Conway, Arkansas. That is an hour and a half down from the Van Buren and Fort Smith area. But to give you some context, before this particular flood, the fastest flow that we had recorded in history was about 400,000 cubic feet per second. And in Fort Smith and Van Buren, we've been checking that every day. We peaked at about 570,000 cubic feet per second. So, and we peaked at about 40 feet and a little over that. The previous record was 38. So this is more water than we've ever seen in the history of recorded history of the Arkansas River. But the biggest concern right now is well east of the area that I represent in the Fort Smith Van Buren area. It's down in the Pope and Yell County areas, and both of you are familiar with that particular area. But I spoke with a Pope County judge this morning, Ben Cross. He said they walked about 250 feet of levee in the Pope County area, and it's nothing but a big sponge. This river is carrying a lot of water, and for a sustained period of time, and the damage and the pressure on our levee system is beginning to take its toll.
How's that levee in North Little Rock doing?
Quickly. Say again, please.
How's that levee in North Little Rock doing? We know evacuations had been ordered. There was some talk that the levee had breached. Then that was walked back a bit, saying it's close to breaching. How is that levee in North Little Rock holding up right now?
I'm not close to North Little Rock, so I don't know exactly how that one is doing, but we do have a levee breach in Yell County that is threatening the city of Dardanelle, Arkansas. So
Congressman,
evacuations are happening.
Congressman, I got to leave it there. I'm so sorry. You know, I used to be in work in Little Rock, and I know the people there are so helpful, and they will do that again this time. We'll be right back.
Thank you for your coverage.
And a Fox News alert as we go to Centerra Virginia Beach General Hospital, and the surgeons there who looked after the shooting victims giving an update.
Situation was to prepare for the emergent response and to receive the patients as they arrived. So we mobilized the trauma services. We called for on-call backup. We prepared to receive an unknown number of victims because we were made aware of this when it was still an active shooter situation. And I would like to acknowledge the teamwork of the staff, the medical staff, the nursing personnel, We had excellent preparation from first responders on scene, letting us know what was coming in and keeping us up to date on the situation. For a horrible, tragic event, it went as smoothly as it could possibly have gone.
I'll reemphasize that point too. These things can be difficult. They are difficult, but this event here was very well managed, and it takes a lot of preparation for that to happen, from the hospital standpoint, for administration who supports the trauma program here, down to all different layers of physicians and nursing staff, OR staff, X-ray staff. The whole hospital, I mean that whole hospital is completely involved. It takes people to clean the rooms up afterwards, and that all went extremely well.
There is a fourth victim that was taken to a sister hospital. Is that correct? And you don't have any information?
I have no information on that. I can tell you limited. I can tell you about these patients. I do understand one was taken down Norfolk General. That's what
have you ever dealt with a situation like this before?
Not mass casualty in the sense of 4 or 5 gunshot victims at one time. Individually, yes, we've had 2 or 3, but this kind of thing, mass shootings.
Just curious, were you on duty yesterday when this happened?
I wasn't actually. No, I was
still. Were you on duty, and how does that call come, and how does that sort of?
I was notified of the event that was going on, and since I'm the director, I felt I should be here. The way it generally works is that we have a physician in charge of the whole scene. This wasn't so bad. In a very big situation, we'd have the ER staff outside triaging patients coming into the hospital who would get into the hospital. These were more limited numbers, so everyone came in. My co-surgeons from my group and also another surgical group that participate in trauma were there, and lots of doctors there. So each doctor got a patient. We assessed the patients and found out the severity of the illness, the injuries. Do they need to go to the intensive care? Do they need to go to the operating room immediately? Fortunately, they're all stable enough that we could get all the x-rays we needed. No one had to be rushed to the operating room, and we were able to fully assess them.
Of those that died, how substantial were their injuries? How many gunshots?
There were the one. Okay, I'm sorry.
Even the ones that died.
They pathology at the grave, so we can't say how many wounds they had or anything.
Or can you describe generally how substantial wounds were, or how substantial the injuries were?
Devastating.
Devastating because they died. So one was multiple. The people who died, they suffered multiple injuries to multiple parts. Am I okay to say that? Okay, yeah, I'm totally stop there. Yeah.
Can you talk about the preparation? I know hospitals in the area, they do this a lot where they practice for situations just like this. Does that help?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that I'm not military background, but there's a military phrase that says failing to plan is planning to fail. So there's monthly meetings to handle emergency disaster situations, to prepare for this at multiple levels. We coordinate with the local and regional trauma services and state trauma services. So we have plans to activate people as much as possible. We had 4 operating rooms ready to go at 5 o'clock on Friday night, that's pretty remarkable. Staff stayed around. Blood bank is notified. X-ray teams are notified. Administration played a key role in making sure everything was all done right. It was done very well, and that all takes planning. It all takes practice. You have to know the right people to contact, how to contact them, and so on.
No drill can ever prepare you, though, for that real-life situation. I mean,
you deal with difficult situations on a regular basis, but this recent incident, how did it affect you as a physician, responding to so many patients all at once?
Well, you have to sort of be sort of separate from it in the sense that you can't get too emotionally, personally involved. You have to deal with it as a sort of professional kind of thing. We've had another serious incident a few years ago. You probably remember the 5 children down in Pungo, I think it was. That was a lot more emotional because the children involved. So we are going to meet after this, probably next week sometime, and sort of debrief everything, go over it again. What can we learn from what we did?
The doctors there in Virginia Beach who treated and helped save a number of the shooting victims, speaking and telling us what they went through and how they saved some and were not able to save others. 2 people died at the hospital, we learned. 3 others still there recovering.
Yeah, and you just think about, like the doctors were saying, you can train for a mass shooting event like this, but you can never fully prepare for it when the injured and the dead start coming in.
It's noteworthy as we've seen the increase in mass shootings around the country. Sort of, if you start with Columbine and the way everything has changed, the way the police deal with mass shootings has changed, the way hospitals have trained for it, and as they pointed out, undoubtedly that training and that planning saved a lot of people yesterday.
No doubt. So we're going to go from the East Coast now to the West Coast, San Francisco in particular, where the California Democratic Party convention is now underway, and the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, is on stage right now. Let's listen in.
Prevention bills to strengthen background checks. And we passed legislation supporting our veterans, our men and women in uniform, and their families. For the well-being of women and working families, we passed the Paycheck Fairness Act, equal pay for equal work, and we passed a strong long-term reauthorization update of the Violence Against Women Act. For the future of our young people, we passed the Save the Internet Act to restore net neutrality protections. We passed the Climate Action Now Act, recognizing the existential threat that the climate crisis poses to the health of our communities and the future of God's creation, especially in light of the President's denial of science in that regard. And for expanding freedom in our country, we took historic action to pass the Equality Act to end discrimination against the LGBTQ community. And next week, we will pass the American Dream and Promise Act to protect TPS recipients and our patriotic young dreamers. With the power of the gavel, we will continue to legislate to make progress for the American people. But we will also investigate to defend our democracy and to hold this president and his administration accountable. 6 House committees, spearheaded by Californians, 2 by Californians, our very own Chairwoman Maxine Waters.
And that is House Speaker Nancy Pelosi speaking at the California Democratic Party convention in San Francisco. You heard her take a dig at President Trump on his environmental policies, among other things. And of course, she is not alone. There are lots of 2020 contenders there who are going to be speaking after her today.
And California now becoming even more important in the Democratic nominating process. Claudia Cowan standing by there as the Democrats rally near San Francisco with more. Hi, Claudia.
Hi, good afternoon, Leland. That's right. We're actually on the floor here at the convention at Moscone Center in San Francisco. We've been hearing from Speaker Pelosi and other elected officials giving some welcoming remarks before all of the delegates here, before the presidential hopefuls take the stage. 14 candidates, I should say, are here, and that is the largest gathering of Democratic contenders so far at any one event. Now, some of them, like Senators Bernie Sanders and California's own Kamala Harris, are well known, but others less so. In fact, 10 are polling under 5% in California, and this is their chance to get in the game. Some have already held rallies and fundraisers. 4 attended an immigration forum yesterday in Southern California. More than 6,000 people showed up to hear Senator Elizabeth Warren at a town hall last night in Oakland, and half a dozen candidates began this long day at a labor union breakfast. The 14 hopefuls will only get 7 minutes to make their pitch to the delegates and party faithful, and hope that what they say resonates beyond the convention hall.